It is so frustrating. You're applying for jobs, you're not hearing back what is going on. So while I cannot claim to be able to change the behavior of employers, I wish that I was that powerful that I can change employers' behavior and stop the bad behavior of the ghosting. What I can certainly do is ensure that you are putting your best foot forward and you're doing a brilliant CV and a brilliant application form to make sure that those responsible employers, when they are looking at it, that they're going to pick yours out of the lineup and go, yep, we need to see this person and we need to interview this person. My name is Sinead English. I'm founder of Hilt. Hilt is a career consulting firm, and we work with candidates to ensure that they're landing their dream job by putting their best foot forward with brilliant CVs, with brilliant applications, and following on from that, when you get shortlisted, brilliant interview performances. We also work with organizations on the other side of the interview table, ensuring that they are carrying out robust interviews, that they're asking the right questions. So at Hilt, we see it from both perspectives because we're working with both candidates and with employers in terms of the interview performance. Our website is wearehealth.com. You can follow us on LinkedIn. Many ways to contact us on our website. There is a button whereby you can book a discovery call if you want to do that. So I am not going to sit here for the next 20 minutes and lecture you all about CVs and interviews. I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of the work. And what I am going to do is I'm going to launch a quick poll, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the number one reason that CVs get rejected? So I've put a number of reasons up here. Um, but of these, what do you think is the main one? So again, we speak to hundreds of employers every year. We speak to hundreds of thousands of candidates probably every year. We have a very good handle on why employers reject CVs. Those ones that actively reject and get back to you to say they've rejected them. So what I'm going to do is just going to launch this poll, and hopefully it's going to work. I'll know if it's going to work pretty soon because I'll see the votes coming in. So what do you think is the number one reason that CVs get rejected? So none of these are great, let's face it. I mean, you could say an employer could take issue with any of them. But what is the one that stands out over all the others? Because we would often get people coming to us saying, oh, there's something wrong with my CV. I'm applying for jobs and I'm not getting in. Can you take a look at my CV in your CV review service? And then we're kind of sometimes coming to the conclusion, well, actually, it doesn't matter how much we work on the CV, you're never going to get shortlisted. So why are we saying that? What's the reason? Wow, you're really good at voting. I say there's like, you're flying in here with the votes. Okay, let me see. Okay, I am going to call it now in a second. I'm going to end the poll and then I'm going to put up the results. But there is an overwhelming majority of you going for one. Okay, let's end the poll and show you the results. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Overwhelmingly, 51% of you say that the number one reason that you don't get shortlisted, your CV gets rejected, is the experience or the skills required for the job are not obvious on your CV. And absolutely, yes, that is correct. So can I just tell you, when you are seeing a job description and when they talk about essential criteria, if you don't have the essential criteria, especially if it's a public sector role, there is no point in applying. We had a candidate recently came to us at Hilt. They were 1 month off 3 years experience in a certain field. 1 month off 3 years experience. That's 35 months instead of 36 months. They didn't get shortlisted for just that reason. So, I mean, that is an extreme. But if you don't have the experience or skills required for the job on the CV, that is the number one reason you get shortlisted. Now, I'm not saying that if you almost have all of them and it's a private sector role and they're saying, 3 to 5 years experience and maybe you have 2.5 years experience in a private sector role, chance it. Okay, but sometimes candidates, as I said, come to us thinking, why aren't I getting shortlisted? Maybe it's because my CV is too long or too short. 17% if you said that. Maybe it's because I'm describing my jobs not in a very good way. 15% if you said that. Yeah, maybe that might be a reason, but the main reason is that you just don't have what's required. When we put jobs up on Hilt, if we're looking for people, we get people applying who have none of the things we're looking for. And one of the reasons for that now, I'll just stop sharing that, is that it's so easy to apply. Employers that we speak to, they say they've seen up to a 40% increase in applications this year for jobs. Why is that? Because there's all these AI tools, easy apply, easy AI, where you can just send your CV and your application to 20 jobs in one go. So employers are being more particular about how they're sifting through. So don't waste your time applying for things that you really just are not experienced enough in. You're just going to get disappointed. So just breaking this down a little bit more, um, as you mentioned, 51% of you said that experience skills required for the job are not obvious on your CV. This is absolutely the number one, and this is a definite reject. Okay, but some of the other ones that are maybe at the edges, just going through those, and maybe you can be thinking about your own CV and the last time you applied. Um, why was it rejected? Was it this? If you don't have the skills and not obvious on the CV, then you will get rejected. And that's not to say you don't have them, but if you haven't got them laid out clearly on the CV, you could be rejected for that. So the next category is the likely reject. Likely to be rejected. Um, from the bottom up, a few unexplained time gaps on there. Now, some of you said that that was maybe a deal breaker. It's not always a deal breaker. Likely to be rejected, possibly if they can't explain them and if they, can't be bothered to get you in for an interview to ask you about them. So if you have gaps in your CV, gaps in your career experience where you were maybe taking time out for family reasons, for health reasons, just be very brief and say that, time out of the workplace for family reasons, to care for elderly relatives, to care for family. That's all you have to say. You don't need to explain it in too much detail. Just don't have the gaps in there. Listing your jobs as a list of duties and responsibilities. And this is one we see a lot when we're working with clients. So the way you're describing your job just sounds like this is what I was supposed to do in the job. It doesn't tell the person reading it what you actually did in the job and how well you did it. So that is something I'm going to give you a sample CV shortly now just to show you the difference between the two. The typos and the formatting, I know that people would go on about that a lot. Oh, don't have any typos in your CV because you'll get dinged. Depends on who's looking at it, right? Um, the large applicant tracking systems have a tolerance for spelling mistakes. They also have a tolerance for formatting, as long as they can just about make out what's going on in the applicant tracking systems. So if it's a large multinational company, if there's a couple of typos and the formatting is a little bit off, it's probably not going to make a huge amount of difference. It would make a lot more difference if it's a smaller company looking at it. So they would be likely rejections. The yellow ones, then, that depends on who's looking at it. Too long or too short. I know we make a big deal at Hilton, and most organizations would, about CV no longer than 2 pages. Like, absolutely deal breaker, no longer than 2 pages. However, again, you could have a small to medium-sized enterprise looking at the company, looking at your CV, who goes 3 pages, 4 pages, not a big deal. But as a rule of thumb, 2 pages is enough. But again, it depends on who's looking at it, right? But it's a good benchmark to have it at 2 pages. Date of birth, um, depends on who's looking. If they're ageist and if your date of birth is over a certain period of time, then that could be a reason to reject. So in any case, don't have your date of birth on your CV. It's a bad idea. And also, I often find this: people put their date of birth in their email address. So they may say Joe Blogs 58. Okay, now doesn't take a genius to figure out that Joe Bloggs was born in 1958, right? So that is an indication straight away how old Joe Bloggs is, and it could be somebody who's ages. So again, don't have your age or date of birth on your CV or your email address. You got an AI platform to write it for you, okay? And I'm going to talk a bit about AI shortly. There's loads of great platforms out there, and they're very good at helping you to come up with language. Maybe say this in a little bit of a better way. Now, it can go to the extreme, but if you take an AI platform and you say, "Here's my CV," rewrite it, and you don't proof it, you don't check it against what's involved in the job, then chances are person who's reading it is going to spot that it's AI a mile off, and they're going to reject it. So again, just be careful about that one. It depends on who's looking. And the one that doesn't matter at all is you didn't include your referees on it. Like, you don't have to include your referees on a CV now anyway. So maybe in the past people felt, oh, I need to write down my referees. You don't. Okay, so but the most important by a long way, and you got it straight off, was if you don't have the experience that they're looking for, if it's a private sector company, you need to have maybe 75 to 80% of what they're looking for. If it's public sector, you need to have 100% of what they're looking for. If you don't have that and it's not obvious on the CV, you're probably not going to get shortlisted. And all of the others, you can see them there at the margin. Let's talk about AI. There's no point in having a conversation about CVs without talking about AI now. So here is just a screenshot of some of the many, there's hundreds of tools out there now that will help you to write your CV. And they do serve a purpose. Some of them you will recognize. I mean, obviously ChatGPT is in there, but then there's ones that are just specifically for CVs. But I'm going to tell you about what AI CV makers tend to do. And I'm going to compare that against what employers are looking for. Okay, so here's what AI loves. It loves generic summaries at the top. So you feed in your CV and you say, here, make it sound fabulous, right? It'll give you a generic summary at the top. Employers hate generic summaries. Okay, so watch that if you're going to use it. It will always give you one of these side panels, different colors, bit jazzy. Employers don't like those either. So just be careful of that. It screams AI straight away when you see these side panels. It'll have over the top job descriptions. It'll make it look like you ran the whole universe. Okay, again, tone it down. And AI can be really useful for this because you can say, can you say this in a more toned down way? Can you say this in a more relaxed way? Can you say this more in an XYZ tone of voice? So it'll give you nice words, but just make sure they're matching what you did and matching the job. AI also loves photos. It has a spot up in the corner where it asks you to put in photos. You do not put in photos for jobs in Ireland or the UK. It's not standard. People don't want it. Don't do it. It also does this thing where it gives you, it looks great, doesn't it? These nice graphs in terms of skills in like English. It's like almost 3/4 of the way around this pie chart. Swahili is this much. German is fully this much. But a person reading that can interpret what that graph means. An applicant tracking system, and most of the large companies would have those, has no clue how to interpret that. It has no clue how to interpret this. It's just looking at the keywords, but it doesn't know, for example, that robotics has more little ticks beside it than computer vision. So be careful about that as well. And AI also loves loads of color. Employers don't like color. They want black and white. So serves a purpose, good to get you started, good to give you a better way of explaining your data entry job rather than I plugged numbers into a computer. Like it'll give you a better way of saying it, but just be a little bit aware that you don't go over the top and you're sounding like somebody who could never have done these things. So that's AI. And now let's talk about what the employers want, because again, we're at the coalface and we know we see employers all the time. We hear their feedback about what sort of CVs they're getting. So employers want a targeted summary at the top of the CV. They want 3 to 4 bullet points describing, summarizing your work experience, your education, key skills as relevant to the role that you're applying for. So they want to feel that that CV is tailored to the role rather than, oh, here's my generic CV. Like if an employer sees something like hardworking, dynamic, results-driven individual who can work well in teams, excellent communicator with the ability to manage and contribute to cross-functional teams, honestly, they have heard that a bazillion times. Right? It means nothing to them anymore. So you're much better off talking about the names of the companies you work for, how long you worked there, what the key skills you gained, maybe a project that you worked on, what your level of education is, where you did your qualifications. Put that in the summary because that sounds like you rather than Miss or Mrs. Ms. Generic person that nobody really knows who they are. They want a plain layout. They don't want any color in it. They want the jobs described relevant to what they want. So tailor the CV for each role. Take a look at the language that they're using in the job description and try and reflect that back in how you're describing your jobs. They don't want a photo. They would like a separate skill section, especially if there's people on here today and you're working in an area that requires technical skills, scientific skills, say social media skills, anything that is a set of technical skills to the industry, have a skills section at the top of the CV where you just list those keywords because it's easy for them to see and it's also good for keyword matching for the applicant tracking systems. And they want you to get to the point. That's back to the 2 pages. Sometimes clients would say to us, I have a 30-year career, I can't get it down to 2 pages. And we go, well, you kind of have to, right? Because employers short attention span, they want they want you to do it. So as I mentioned at the start, oops, sorry. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, we are going to be sending an email next week. We're going to include these links to these resources I'm talking about, but if you want to, you can just scan it there. And that first one is going to bring you onto our website, and you can download a sample CV, a CV template. So this one looks like as if it's been attacked by a lot of Post-it notes. And the reason for that is because the Post-it notes are kind of our way of talking to you while you're looking at the CV. So for example, we say things like, put your name here, not curriculum vitae. Don't include your last year of your date of birth and your email address, a detailed summary, and it gives you an example of what we mean by that. We talk then about bullet points using positive language. So this is the and other phone number, email, no address, put postal addresses on, career experience laid out, nice punchy bullet points. So it takes you through that. So I think that's a very useful resource for you to have when you're writing your CV, even just in terms of the structure, like how should I structure it? What comes first? What comes second? You can see it is plain, it is professional looking, it's not jazzy, there's no borders, there's no graphs. That is what employers want. Okay, so that's on the CV side of things. Now let's talk about the application form because we did promise we were going to do that as well. Gosh, I've got about 5 minutes left, so I better hurry up. um, Application form, competency questions, bane of people's lives, right? You see these things and it says in 200 words or 300 words, please describe an example of a time when you showed your commitment to quality services or performance through people or whatever it is they're looking for. So a bit of a nightmare on how to put those together. And I love an old visual. So what the way that I visualize this is that they have their definition. The organization will have it, and this is a lot to do with the public sector organizations. They have their definition of what the competency involves, and they tell you that. They give you bullet points as to what's involved in this competency. And then on the other side of the table, you have, well, here's the example I was planning to use. So do these two talk to each other? There needs to be crossover. There needs to be crossover between what's in your example and what they're looking for. It's not your example of what you think, say, performance through people or delivering results or communication skills is. It's how they see it and how they define it. So there needs to be crossover. So for the competency questions, you want one good example. Don't have a cop out and go, oh, I'll put in three kind of wishy-washy ones and hope for the best. One good example is better than two or three wishy-washy ones. The scenario that you're giving needs to match the job requirement. So for example, if you're moving up to a senior level role, there's no point in giving them an example of that shows you in a junior level role capacity, proving that particular competency. So you need to think up and you need to think examples to match the role. Use the STAR structure. If you're not familiar with the STAR structure, go on our website and there's as much information as you're ever going to need about STAR on there. Give them back their language. So this is what I mean about the crossover. So for example, just took a screen grab the other day of a HSE, a grade 7 role. One of the competencies is evaluating information, problem solving and decision making. And I've taken their definition of what they think that competency means. So it's gathering and analyzing information, weighing up a range of factors, making sound decisions, well-reasoned rationale, showing initiative. So doesn't it make sense that when I'm describing, giving them my 300-word summary or example of me evaluating information, problem solving, decision making, I'm going to use their words. So I'm going to say things in my example like, through this, I gathered and analyzed the information that I thought would be relevant. I used a range of different factors. I demonstrated my ability to make a well-reasoned rationale when I did X. I showed initiative when I did Y. So give them back their language. Don't recreate the wheel and come up with a whole different set of words. Use their language. And that's going to help you look more relevant to the role. Make it a real story, not a how-to. We would often see when we're looking at people's application forms, they'd say, well, the most important thing when you're evaluating information, solving problems is to consider all of the options. And in doing that, the most important thing is, and it sounds like a manual, like on how to do the competency. They don't want that. They want a real story of you in the situation. Don't go back more than 4 years. And in the end of it, that R in the star stands for the result. So when I read your story, I should be able to go, okay, I see the difference that that made, rather than well, so what? Like you're just giving me 300 words and you haven't proven anything. So if you're reading your answer and you're going, oh, so what? Then go back again. You need to take another look at it. I know that there's a number of people on here today who are filling in application forms and there isn't competency questions on there, but what there is this even worse. a personal statement, which is like in 300 words, describe why you think you're suitable for the role or something like that. So you're going, oh my God, where do I go with this, right? So some overall guidelines on how to attack or tackle this particular big empty box staring at you, waiting for you to put stuff in. So structure it, even though there isn't any structure to that particular box, put in your own structure. You're going to have 5 to 7 subheadings, not one big long paragraph. People hate reading long paragraphs. Okay, so things like how are you going to structure it? What headings are you going to use? Go back to the job description. They're going to have things on there like the eligibility criteria or the key duties or the ideal candidate will demonstrate. It's going to have some heading like that where it's going to give you a steer on exactly what the person that they're looking for needs to have. Remember, this is shortlisting. This is not proving that you're great at interviews. This is getting into the room. So you need to describe yourself in a way that is relevant to what they're looking for. So for example, subheadings, I've said 5 to 7 subheadings. So say this was a job where in the key duties or eligibility criteria, it said that I needed to have relevant administration experience at a sufficiently high level. I would give them 2 or 3 lines on this. I'd say since 2021, I've been responsible for X. During this time, I managed administration roles for A and B. 3 to 4 lines per subheading. Next one, I'm supposed to have effective financial and resource management skills. Okay, how am I going to prove that? I'm going to give them a couple of little snippets of when I did that. In my role as X, I was administration for a budget of X, gained thorough working knowledge of the steps involved. I led the creation of SOPs. Just short, this is not the star structure where you're going the whole big rigmarole. You're just giving them little snippets because remember, 300 words, 5 to 7 subheadings. That's not a lot of words per subheading. And as an example, the third one, then I also have the ability to supervise a team. I could say, well, when working at Y between this date and this date, I was responsible for managing and motivating a team of X many people. So structure it, subheadings, where those subheadings coming from, they're being reflected from the job description. So if you were giving them a personal statement that is very much weighted towards the job description and what they need in the job description, you're just increasing your chances of looking relevant to the role. This is not a place where you say, oh, you know, I'm very motivated by keeping fit and going out for walks like that. That's not going to help you get the job. So it's all about back to the job. Again, there needs to be that crossover. So I've got a QR code here for you. So I love my QR codes today. Next week, we will send you, as I said, an email with this summarized and may even put in a little bit of a video of what we're doing here, what I'm doing here today. But in that email you're going to get next week, we're going to put in a checklist for you. And this is a very practical checklist for when you're filling in these competency questions. Have I done this in my answer? Have I done this? So there's 10 of them here, like for simple things like, is my example from the last 3 to 4 years? No, go back to the start. Have I used STAR? Am I taking ownership? Am I using the word I in the action section? So these are little checklist for you after you've written your answer to make sure that you're going to get 10 out of 10. And you need to be getting 10 out of 10 for this. If you've got 10 out of 10 for this, then you've got a much stronger chance of being shortlisted. So that's a self-assessment. And we will send you that again next week. And then finally, apologies, I know I've gone a few minutes over time. I was a bit ambitious saying 20 minutes. We have on our website, wearehealth.com, a huge amount of free resources. There are a huge amount of blogs and we update those very regularly. There's also some downloads, free interview and CV guides that you can download. There's also a link to my book, which isn't free. It's $13.50. So I wrote this book a couple of years ago and it was updated again a few years ago, CV and Interview 101. So it's 40 CV tips, some application form ones in there as well, and then 61 tips on writing or on doing a great interview. So assuming you listen to what we're saying here today and you've got a great CV and a great application form, you are going to be getting interviews. Of course, we provide services on CV reviews and interview training, but you could also get a lot of this information from the book. It's $13.50. You can buy it off the website. You can also buy it off Amazon, but I can tell you, Jeff Bezos won't get as much kick out of selling one of our books on Amazon as we do when we sell it on the website. So you could take a look at that as well. So that is everything that I had planned to cover for today. I hope that you have got some great ideas now for how you can, someone's just put me a question in there, for how you can tailor your CV. I know that it's frustrating. You're sending out these CVs and you're not hearing back. But back to what I was saying, AI has been an enabler for so many people in helping them, but it's also been a detractor because it is companies are now seeing 30 to 40% increase in applications because it's so easy to do it. So you need to make yourself stand out by getting the basics right. So thanks everybody for attending and for listening. You are going to get the resources next week. I'll let you get back to your work now. I thank you for all the lovely hearts and stars coming up the side of the screen. Have a great rest of day and a great weekend, which is coming soon.